The man was approaching a prisoner who had just been in an accident. Without saying a word, he immediately inserted a syringe into the prisoner. His goal was to take revenge on the prisoner before him. Turns out they had a grudge against each other before. The prisoner was the son of a wealthy family. He had a hobby of driving very fast on the streets. He was extremely arrogant and cruel. Simply because the truck in front of him was moving too slowly and delaying him by a few seconds, he immediately rushed forward and blocked front of the truck. The young master then got out of his car, pulling out a baseball bat and demanding that the truck driver get out. The husband wanted to step out of the truck, but his pregnant wife stopped him. She was close to giving birth and didn't want any trouble. Seeing this, the rich young master started violently smashing and kicking the truck. Tormenting the poor was one of his hobby. The husband, that unable to stand it any longer, wanted to get out and fight, but his wife begged him to endure it for the sake of their child. Seeing this, the rich young master aggressively smashed the truck harder. The younger sister, who was sitting inside the car, couldn't take it any longer and told him to stop. Only then did he temporarily pause. However, as he was leaving, the look of contempt from the husband angered him once again. Jae-hwan immediately chased after the truck, his mouth continuously saying vicious words. The younger sister hurriedly called up to her eldest brother. She told him to come quickly and handle her second brother, who was about to kill someone. Unexpectedly, after the eldest brother turned off the phone, he told his subordinates to quickly send someone to cause an accident to assassinate Jae-hwan. Immediately, a truck was dispatched. By this time, the rain had started pouring down harder. The rich young master once again drove off the car forward to block the truck. Both vehicles stopped in the middle of the intersection. Just then, the hitman also arrived in his car. The rich young master managed to drive away just to escape in time, but the truck-driving couple was unfortunately hit by the hitman. After the accident, the couple was taken to the hospital. The emergency medicine doctor turned out to be a good friend of the husband. The husband, in great pain, that tightly gripped Yi-jae's hand and begged him to save his wife and child. After saying that the husband died because he was so badly injured, Yi-jae tried his best to save his best friend, but still couldn't. He painfully watched his best friend die right before his eyes without being able to do anything. The pregnant wife's situation was also extremely critical at this time. Tests revealed that she was suffering from papilledema in her brain. Yi-jae ordered immediate surgery to save her life. However, while he was performing the craniotomy, the rich young master burst into the operating room, interrupting the procedure. He pointed and demanded that the best doctor was Ji-ae to prioritize treating the scratch on his younger sister's forehead. He claimed that if they delayed any longer, the cut on her forehead would close. Yi-jae refused this unreasonable request and was immediately grabbed by Jae-won. Jae-won told Yi-jae that his father owned the hospital and that he was the chairman's son. He threatened Yi-jae that if he didn't want to be fired, he should just let the pregnant woman die. Yi-jae immediately ordered him to leave. He warned that if Jae-won didn't go, he would call the police. Hearing this, Jae-won reluctantly left the operating room. Yi-jae quickly returned to continue the surgery to save the pregnant woman. He was close to saving her when the hospital director suddenly arrived and ordered him to stop. The director insisted that Yi-jae tend to the scratch on the chairman's daughter's forehead. He personally led Yi-jae out. However, when they arrived, the cruel young man was lounging there with his feet up. He threatened that if Yi-jae left the room again, he would make sure Yi-jae was fired immediately. Ignoring Jae-won's threats, Yi-jae rushed back to save the pregnant woman, but due to the delay, the critical time to save her had passed. Despite his best efforts, Yi-jae could no longer save her. The pregnant woman's heart stopped beating, and Yi-jae helplessly watched the flat line on the electrocardiogram. Yi-jae's promise to his friend to save his wife had failed. Yi-jae blamed himself deeply. He knew that if he had been firm and thrown the rich young man out earlier, he could have saved both mother and child. The rich young man immediately called the police to arrest Yi-jae. He also declared that this was the price for daring to defy him. Jae-won had Yi-jae's medical license revoked, leaving Yi-jae full of resentment but powerless to do anything. After this incident, Yi-jae was sentenced to 1 year in prison. He was incarcerated at a prison in northern of Seoul, a facility reserved for powerful criminals. 1 year later, Yi-jae was released. He returned to the prison to meet with a powerful lady detained there. She had been sentenced to 50 years for killing her husband's lover. She wanted Yi-jae to help her fake an illness so she could be released. In return, she promised to help him get revenge on the cruel young man. Using his exceptional medical knowledge, Yi-jae suggested that she fake having Fanconi anemia, a condition that would allow her to be freed for immediate treatment. To pull off this deception, she needed to avoid sleep and take hypothyroid medication to disrupt her hormones, and sun-dry clothes with holes cut into them to create bruises on her skin. After After enduring these harsh conditions for a few days, the best time to act was when she experienced a nosebleed. EJ provided the woman with a mysterious vial. The liquid inside would temporarily stop her heart when she became too stressed. The following day, the prosecutor's office reviewed her case. The doctors had a glance at the bruises on her body, the symptoms of insomnia, and her nosebleeds. They immediately concluded that it was a rare form of leukemia, requiring her immediate release for treatment. However, the prosecutor refused to approve the release. At that moment, the heart-stopping drug took effect that the lady suddenly collapsed, temporarily suffering cardiac arrest. EJ was waiting outside and ready to save her. Due to her critical condition, she was granted freedom to seek medical treatment. She immediately ordered her subordinates to assist EJ, appointing him as the medical director of Northern Prison. The lady was puzzled as to why EJ wanted to be a prison doctor. It turned out that Jae-hwan, the rich young man, had just been arrested and would be imprisoned at North Seoul Prison, so Yeeja's journey of revenge officially began. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan was being transported to prison on a bus, and he was unaware of the suffering awaiting him. It started when the bus stopped at a red light at a deserted intersection. For some reason, the light kept flashing yellow and hasn't turned green at all. Sun-chun sensed danger and immediately buckled his seatbelt. Sure enough, right after that, a truck rushed towards them, hitting the rich young master Jae-hwan straight on, knocking the bus carrying the prisoners off-road. The seriously injured young master Jae-hwan crawled out of the car. He thought he had escaped death. At that moment, a car rushed over. Jae-hwan thought it was his subordinates coming to pick him up and started shouting and cursing, but he quickly panicked when he saw the man's face. It was Yi-jae, the man he had framed and imprisoned a year ago. Yi-jae suddenly used pliers to cut off Jae-hwan's handcuffs. After listening closely, he diagnosed that Jae-hwan had broken ribs and a pneumothorax. Yi-jae calmly informed him that he would likely die within 10 minutes. However, Jae-hwan responded with a sneer, implying that he had no intention of staying there that long. Yi-jae looked up and heard the sound of an ambulance from afar. These policemen and doctors were all Jae-hwan's family members. It turned out that Jae-hwan had also arranged the accident to be released for medical treatment. As long as the doctor got the medical records correct, he would be released. But how could Yi-jae let him go so easily? He grabbed Jae-hwan by the collar and stabbed the needle into his shoulder, wanted to pretend to give him first aid to take him somewhere else. By the time Jae-hwan's ambulance and family members arrived at the scene, Yi-jae and two of his men had already put Jae-hwan into their vehicle and driven off. Their goal was to reach a hospital that wasn't under Jae-hwan's family members' control. A little while later, Min-sik, who was the prison's medical director, arrived at the scene. The police informed him that Yi-jae had taken Jae-hwan. Min-sik recalled what the hospital director had once mentioned, that Yi-jae had been imprisoned and stripped of his medical license because of Jae-hwan. Realizing that Yi-jae was now seeking revenge, Min-sik immediately issued an alert to track down Yi-jae's vehicle. Shortly afterward, Min-sik received a call from a small hospital. The doctor on the line said that Jae-hwan had been brought there for treatment, but they lacked a surgeon. Yi-jae asked Min-sik if he could be the one to perform the surgery. Min-sik knew that Yi-jae had a grudge against Jae-hwan, so he ordered the doctor to kick Yi-jae out. Hearing this from his hospital bed, Jae-hwan smiled, thinking he had escaped danger. However, everything was under Yi-jae's control. He said that Jae-hwan should be begging him to save his life, as the glass shard would soon kill him. Sure enough, as soon as Yi-jae left, Jae-hwan began coughing up blood. Everyone hurried to take him into surgery, but there was no surgeon available. Seeing that his vital signs were rapidly declining, the doctors had no choice but to beg Yi-jae to perform the surgery. Yi-jae actually agreed to operate on Jae-hwan. Seeing the dying young master, Yi-jae asked him if he was afraid yet. Yi-jae would make him pay for the crime he committed against his friend's pregnant wife that day. Young master Jae-hwan was so frightened that he cried. He finally felt the fear of death, but Yi-jae didn't let him die easily. He proceeded with the surgery. At that moment, director Min-sik arrived and demanded that Yi stop, but he refused and said that if he stopped, Jae-hwan would die. Hearing this, the prison medical director Min-sik gave up and allowed it. Unexpectedly, Jae-hwan's mother and her doctor arrived, insisting that Yi stop the surgery. However, due to the doctor's authority, it not allowed to intervene during the procedure. So Yi-jae kept continuing, making the mother increasingly furious. She screamed angrily, intended to break down the door. At that moment, Jae-hwan's half-brother was Jae-jun arrived. He agreed to let Dr. Yi-jae proceed with the surgery. Although it was their first time meeting, they understood each other well. They shared the same goal, was to put Jae-hwan in prison. By that way, no one will compete with Jae-jun for the chairman position anymore. The stepmother knew this and was extremely angry but could do nothing. The surgery was successful and Jae-hwan's life was saved. Jae-jun asked when Jae-hwan would be sent back to prison. Yi-jae said it would usually take 2 weeks, but if Jae-jun preferred, he could send Jae-hwan back as early as tomorrow. Jae-jun laughed and thanked Yi-jae was truly reliable. Yi-jae then expressed his hope that Jae-jun would appoint him as the prison's medical director. He promised that Jae-hwan would never be pardoned or released for medical reasons. Jae-jun immediately agreed and ordered the current medical director to prepare to hand over the position to Yi-jae. Mik-sik, who was about to lose his job, was extremely furious. He informed Jae-hwan's mother. Of course, the chairman's wife could not let things go like that. 2 weeks later, Jae-hwan recovered, then he was sent back to prison. Yi-jae also arrived to prepare for his new role as medical director. The prisoners welcomed Yi-jae like a hero because a year ago, he had treated and saved many of them. When the former director heard the news, he rushed over. He was furious and barged into his office, where Yi-jae was calmly treating the prisoners. Min-sik refused to let Yi-jae take over as medical director while he hadn't officially lost his position. He told Yi-jae that he could only be a temporary director until Min-sik resigned. However, Min-sik was determined not to lose his position easily. That evening, Min-sik made calls everywhere to seek for help in hopes of keeping his job. Unexpectedly, his wife brought him a box filled with evidence of his crimes, including falsified medical records, to grant prisoners release from their sentences. Yi-jae called Min-sik, asking if he liked the gift he sent. He told Min-sik that if he wanted to live peacefully, he should quickly write his resignation letter. He also demanded that Min-sik immediately attend a banquet and publicly declare Yi-jae as the new director in front of everyone. With no other option, Min-sik had to agree. However, just as he was leaving, a subordinate suddenly stopped him and revealed that the mastermind behind the accident that day was Yi-jae. He also mentioned that Yi-jae's accomplice was Sang-chun, also on that same bus during the incident. They knew an accident was about to happen, so they fastened their seatbelts early. They also helped Yi-jae take Jae-hwan away. After learning the truth, Min-sik immediately called Yi-jae. He said that he knew the accident had been orchestrated by Yi-jae. Upon hearing this, Yi-jae felt anxious, while Min-sik gave a smug smile. He immediately drove straight to the prison, first asking the loyal prison warden to turn off all the cameras, and then pulled out a large amount of insulin. Min-sik silently entered the room and chained Sang-chun to the bed. He intended to use this method to force Sang-chun to confess everything. Min-sik drew a large syringe of insulin and immediately injected it into Sang-chun's stomach. An insulin overdose would cause the victim to fall into a coma and eventually have a heart attack. Realizing he was about to die, Sang-chun became extremely frightened. Min-sik grabbed another syringe, intending to kill him faster. In the terror, Sang-chun confessed everything. He admitted that if he helped Yi-jae get the position of the prison's medical director, he could receive temporary release for medical treatment. Min-sik recorded the entire confession on his phone, but after getting everything he needed, he still maliciously injected the remaining insulin into Sang-chun's body. This was because Min-sik knew that Yi-jae had just arrived and planned to frame him for the murder. However, what Min-sik didn't know was that Yi-jae was a genius doctor. Although Sang-chun's heart had stopped and seemingly dead, Yi-jae managed to save him in time by administering glucose. Yi-jae then confronted Min-sik, questioning why he had done something so cruel. Min-sik confidently recorded the screen of video showing Yi-jae meeting Sang-chun. At the same time, he used a recording to threaten Yi-jae into giving up his position as medical director. If Yi-jae didn't comply, Min-sik would send him back to prison. However, Yi-jae still had a secret about Min-sik. He revealed that he knew Min-sik had a private hospital for treating high-ranking prisoners. Yi-jae asked what would happen if he had the list of those secret prisoners. Hearing this, Min-sik's face turned pale. To prove his point, Yi-jae showed him photos of the list. Min-sik looked at the first 3 pages, but then Yi-jae snatched the phone back. It became clear that Min-sik really did have a private hospital. He hurriedly went home to open the safe. Only now did he know that Sang-chun had taken a picture of this list. If this was revealed, his family would be in prison forever. Min-sik immediately went to access the camera, discovered that Sang-chun had secretly taken a picture of the list. However, he couldn't understand why Yi-jae having the evidence all along but didn't directly report to the police. This made him suspicious. He called Yi-jae and arranged a meeting to probe him further. The next day in a small forest, Min-sik agreed to step down from the director position in exchange for the list of officials treated at the hospital. But Yi-jae said that wasn't enough. He also wanted the VIP list from the prison, which included wealthy individuals held in the special zone. Min-sik was shocked by Yi-jae's ambition, but under the current circumstances, Min-sik had no choice but to cooperate. However, just before the transaction that a phone call interrupted them. It turned out that Jae-hwan's mother wanted to meet and talk with Min-sik, so he had to reschedule the transaction with Yi-jae. After Min-sik left, Yi-jae seemed extremely worried. Min-sik went to meet the chairwoman and promised that he would get her son out within a month. However, the chairwoman was doubtful because Yi-jae was opposing him there. Min-sik then took out evidence, an audio recording of Yi-jae and Sang-chun conspiring to cause the accident involving Jae-hwan. If this recording were made public, Yi-jae would definitely end up in prison and Jae-hwan would be set free. But the daughter Jae-in, who was a lawyer, pointed out that illegally obtained evidence would wouldn't be admissible. Min-sik then showed a memory card with surveillance footage of Yi-jae and Sang-chun meeting. In exchange, Min-sik demanded that the chairwoman retrieve the list from Yi-jae and return it to him, while also appointing him as the director of the VIP section of her hospital. The chairwoman, because of her son, happily agreed. Jane suggested that she hold on to the USB. Min-sik, without suspicion, agreed. Unexpectedly, he hadn't been happy for long when he received a phone call from a wealthy man. The man furiously said that his son, who had just been released with a fake medical report, was now back in prison. He demanded that Min-sik either postpone the sentence or return the 500 million won he had paid. Of course, this was Yi-jae's doing. Yi-jae knew that Min-sik had been faking medical reports to delay sentences in exchange for bribes, so now he wanted to bring those prisoners back. When Jae-won saw Yi-jae passing by, he cursed at Yi-jae repeatedly, which made Yi-jae furious. Yi-jae immediately ordered Jae-won to be transferred to a new, larger cell. Jae-won thought that Yi-jae had finally come to his senses, but when entering the new cell, he was shocked. The man in front of him was even more arrogant than he was. On top of that, several muscular prisoners were staring him down, scaring Jae-won into screaming for help. But by then, it was too late. At this moment, Min-sik came to meet Yi-jae, angrily asking why he had sent the prisoner, whom Min-sik had arranged to be released, back to jail. After all, Min-sik had already given the VIP list to Yi-jae. Yi-jae responded by asking why Min-sik had met with the chairwoman. Did he promise her that he would get Jae-won released? Min-sik was shocked that Yi-jae knew about this. He threatened to expose all of Yi-jae's criminal evidence, but Yi-jae calmly replied that the surveillance footage only gets stored for 30 days, and that time had already passed. Min-sik arrogantly claimed that he had saved it on a USB. He called Jae-in and demanded that she return the memory card. To his surprise, Jae-in said she had never received such a card. Min-sik was stunned after hearing that. He realized that Jae-won's mother wasn't as simple as he thought. She wanted to incriminate Yi-jae herself so that she wouldn't have to depend on anyone. Min-sik was ruthlessly abandoned. That night, Yi-jae went out drinking alone. He remembered the day he was arrested, which was also the day his mother died because she didn't receive surgery. That was the greatest pain that Yi-jae could never forget. Yi-jae was determined to take revenge on Min-sik for his mother's death. Late at night, when he returned home, he suddenly found the door open. Upon entering, he saw a stranger looking through his revenge plans. Yi-jae was about to attack when he realized it was his former hospital director. The man told Yi-jae that the medical director of the prison had immense power. The secretary of prisons changed every 2 years, yet Min-sik had been in his position for 22 years. He advised Yi-jae to stop confronting Min-sik, warning that his life could be in danger. Yi-jae replied that it was because of Min-sik that his mother died. Therefore, no matter what, he had to get his revenge on Min-sik. Hearing this, the hospital director had no choice but to leave. He later reported everything to Director General Jo. At the same time, Min-sik was also present. It turned out that the Director General's name was on the list of those who faked medical records for early release, so he was terrified that the list would be exposed. The Director General ordered that the list be retrieved from Yi-jae at any cost, even if it meant killing him. Min-sik then returned to the hospital and carefully reviewed the footage of Sang-chun taking the list. He realized that Sang-chun had only photographed the first 3 pages. This was why Yi-jae had snatched the phone back after Min-sik had viewed those 3 pages. Min-sik was certain that the original list was still in Sang-chun's possession. Min-sik told the Director General that if his guess was right, the list was inside the prison. Min-sik immediately drove to the prison and searched through all of Sang-chun's belongings to find the list, but strangely, that it was nowhere to be found. At that moment, a prison guard nearby said that the night before, Sang-chun had sent a package via express delivery, and the recipient was none other than Yi-jae. Upon hearing this, Min-sik became extremely anxious. He rushed to Yi-jae's office to intercept the package, but by then, Yi-jae had already received it. He opened, but it wasn't the list. It was just a note from Sang-chun saying that the list had been hidden safely. At that moment, Min-sik burst into the room and grabbed the package. Yi-jae asked if Min-sik was looking for the documents, and Min-sik, thinking it was the list, fell for Yi-jae's bluff. Yi-jae then used the opportunity to threaten him, demanding that Min-sik resign immediately. Min-sik agreed, but on the condition that he could first verify whether the list was real. Yi-jae blocked him and warned that if Min-sik opened the envelope, he would hand it over to the prosecutor. Min-sik hesitated. Opening it would risk jail time, but not opening it would leave him vulnerable to future threats. Suddenly, Min-sik smiled because he had seen through Yi-jae's plan. He confidently said it was certain this wasn't the list, but Yi-jae was also extremely confident. He opened the file in front of Min-sik, and inside was indeed the real list. Min-sik didn't dare to look at it. Yi-jae took back the list and said he would hand it over over to the inspectors. As Yee-jae was preparing to send the list, that Min-sik desperately stopped him, saying he was willing to follow Yee-jae's orders and agreeing to hold a meeting the next morning to announce his resignation. Min-sik furiously stormed out of the office. In reality, the list was fake, created by the lady to help Yee-jae deceive Min-sik. At the doctor's meeting that afternoon, Yee-jae assigned tasks to everyone. He directly ordered Min-sik to inspect the worst prisoner section. Min-sik obediently complied, leaving everyone shocked. No one expected the former head of the prison to now be working under Yee-jae. Even the prisoners were astonished, seeing their former director now tending to the worst inmates. At this moment, a scar-faced man wanted to reveal a secret. He said he knew everything about the list. Upon hearing this, Min-sik's demeanor changed. The scar-faced man explained that the package Sang-chun had sent was just a handwritten letter, as he was the one who had sent it. Overjoyed by this news, Min-sik immediately stormed out and abandoned his inspection. He rushed to Yee-jae's office and searched everywhere. Sure enough, he found the letter in the paper shredder. Min-sik smirked triumphantly. Through the scar-faced man, Min-sik learned that the real list had been given to Sang-chun's daughter. He immediately led his men to the hospital to capture Sang-chun, and then made a video call, pretending to have kidnapped him. His daughter saw everything and was terrified, so she immediately handed over the list to Min-sik. Upon hearing what had happened, Yee-jae rushed to Sang-chun's hospital room, but when he arrived, that only Min-sik was there waiting for him. Min-sik told Yee-jae that now he would show him his true power. He boasted about how he had once refused to perform surgery, letting Yee-jae's mother die, and now he would torment Yee-jae in the same way. After saying this, Min-sik left joyfully. Soon after, he recovered the list of corrupt officials and ordered his men to send an assassin to kill Yee-jae. At that moment, Yee-jae was on his way back to the prison. The lady called him and warned that if he entered the prison, he would lose his life. Yee-jae slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The prison gate had already been locked by the guards. Yee-jae panicked and went out. It turned out that the prison was having a fire drill, but on the opposite side, the man with the scar looked at Yee-jae, and the assassins drew their knives, ready to eliminate him. Seeing this, Yee-jae quickly ran away. The prisoner assassins chased him into the house. With no way to run, Yee-jae could only fight. Because there were too many enemies, he fought and ran at the same time. After running for a while, he reached the cell and quickly closed the door. Yee-jae thought he had lost them, but Min-sik and the prison guards were watching through the cameras. Min-sik noticed that this prison part was completely deserted. Realizing this was the perfect moment to kill Yee-jae without leaving any traces, Min-sik was overjoyed, then sent the guards away, staying behind to watch everything unfold through the cameras. Inside, Yee-jae was walking when he was suddenly ambushed. Under orders, the prisoners cut his wrists. Watching from the camera, Min-sik laughed. In this dire moment, Yee-jae desperately shouted for Sang-chun to save him. Sure enough, Sang-chun appeared. Having betrayed Yee-jae after receiving a release order from Min-sik, Yee-jae quickly offered Sang-chun a better deal, telling him he had a way to get Sang-chun released immediately so he could see his daughter. Hearing this, Sang-chun agreed and freed Yee-jae. Knowing that Min-sik was watching, Yee-jae covered the camera, but Min-sik switched to another camera and caught everything on tape. Yee-jae then made a precise stab to Sang-chun's abdomen so that he could be taken out for emergency treatment. Just as Min-sik was reveling in the video he had captured, the camera suddenly lost power. Someone had secretly shut off the power source. Min-sik rushed outside, but Sang-chun had already been taken away. Yee-jae had successfully turned the situation around and escaped death. Min-sik was furious that the assassination had failed. While he seethed with anger, the scar-faced man offered to handle the next assassination of Yee-jae himself. This made Min-sik very pleased. Min-sik then interrogated the jailers to find out who had turned off the power, but they couldn't identify the culprit. Meanwhile, Yee-jae rushed Sang-chun to the hospital. The wound was expertly placed so it wasn't life-threatening, but suddenly, Sang-chun started seizing from excessive blood loss. Yee-jae panicked as he had calculated everything perfectly. It wasn't until he reviewed the medical records that he realized Sang-chun had a blood clotting disorder. Yee-jae had no choice but to rush Sang-chun to Kong Hospital for emergency treatment. Unexpectedly, the doctor there was also under Min-sik's control. After a while, Sang-chun was successfully saved. Yee-jae told him that once he recovered, he would be able to meet his daughter. Just then, Min-sik appeared again and demanded that Sang-chun be immediately transferred back to the prison for treatment, as the head doctor there was also one of his subordinates. Hearing this, Sang-chun was enraged and sat up, realizing that his dream of meeting his daughter once again had been crushed. Sang-chun wept bitterly, devastated as his daughter was gravely ill, and his last wish was simply to see her for a little while. Yee-jae, moved by this, wanted to help Sang-chun. On that day, the prison received 20 new inmates, one of whom was a young man with blonde hair, a deranged psychopath. The large man behind him kept pushing and shoving, which infuriated the blonde young man. He immediately turned around and attacked the large man, even striking him in a vital spot on his neck. If the guards hadn't intervened, the large man would have died on the spot. The doctor noticed a ruptured artery and rushed him away for treatment. Looking over the blonde man's file, EJ found something strange. The young man had murdered multiple women, yet was only sentenced to 5 years in prison. EJ suspiciously went to confront him directly and asked if he was faking a mental illness to receive a reduced sentence. The blonde man calmly admitted to it and then asked EJ how much money he wanted. EJ realized that the man had also committed rape. He had kidnapped women, brought them to his house, and used a burning iron to torture them until they died. However, due to his psychiatric record, he was only sentenced to 5 years in prison. Determined to punish this murderer, EJ was infuriated when the man brazenly asked if 2 billion won would be enough to help him get out. Upon hearing this, EJ stood up and kicked him, then he broke the murderer's arm. The murderer tried to get up and fight back, but he was ultimately beaten mercilessly by EJ. EJ wanted him to feel the pain of the victims he had tortured. Unexpectedly, the murderer struggled. He got up and fought back, locking EJ in a tight hold and choking him on the ground. Just at that critical moment, a female doctor arrived in time to administer anesthesia, which allowed EJ to escape death. The female doctor named So-jum was also a doctor at the prison. The prison guard informed Min-sik that the murderer was the son of the chairman of the Steel Corporation, and they might have to help him get out of prison. Meanwhile, the female doctor told EJ that she hated the murderer because her sister was also victimized by him. Min-sik hurriedly went to apologize to the murderer, flattering him by saying that he would soon help him get out of prison. To his surprise, the murderer said he wouldn't leave unless EJ personally arranged for him to have a release diagnosis. Upon hearing this, Min-sik went to meet EJ. EJ agreed to help the murderer get released in exchange for allowing Sang-chun to meet his daughter. Min-sik happily accepted this condition. That evening, Sang-chun was very pleased to see his daughter. He sent EJ the complete list of patients from Min-sik's private hospital. EJ then went with Min-sik to meet the chairman of the Steel Corporation. EJ said he would arrange for the chairman's son to be released on the grounds of bipolar disorder, a condition caused by the body being contaminated with too much copper. In return, the chairman would have to favor EJ. The chairman happily agreed to this arrangement. Shortly after, EJ called the chairwoman, requesting her hospital to provide a diagnostic certificate for the murderer. The chairwoman immediately agreed because she wanted to cooperate with EJ. EJ then handed over the medical records to Min-sik, requesting him to submit the health assessment record for the murderer. Min-sik agreed, but as soon as EJ left, he called in the jailer. Min-sik said he wanted to use this opportunity to expose the falsified medical records in order to frame up EJ. The prosecutor quickly received a request for a health assessment for the murderer and was surprised to see that it was signed by EJ. The prosecutor was certain that EJ would forge the medical records, so this time he was determined to expose EJ. However, unbeknownst to him, EJ had prepared meticulously to make the murderer exhibit the exact symptoms of bipolar disorder. Each day, the murderer was given only raw mushrooms, along with high-concentration copper supplements, and was regularly given antifungal medication, pushing his liver to the brink of failure, causing the body to exhibit the exact symptoms of Wilson bipolar disorder. Soon the day for the health assessment arrived, and So-jum was also one of the doctors on the evaluation team. The murderer had completely changed. His cracked lips and pale face made him look poisoned. So-jum couldn't believe it, as just a few days earlier, he had been in good health. The murderer was taken inside for the examination. So-jum said that she didn't know how EJ had managed to make him like that, but she was determined not to allow him to delay his sentence. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, EJ remained very confident. Then the entire team proceeded to the health examination. The first step was a blood test to check for copper levels. The second step involved checking the cornea, and all the symptoms indicated Wilson's syndrome. The next step was to examine the muscles, because before that, EJ had previously injected a drug that weakened the murderer's muscles. Sure enough, when the doctor asked him to squeeze a ball, that he immediately fell to the ground and convulsed. The doctors were very scared, but EJ calmly stated that he would recover in just a few minutes. Indeed, the murderer quickly regained his strength because that was a symptom of Wilson's disease. So he had passed 5 tests showing that he was ill. Now only to scan the brain MRI was left to complete the process. However, for the MRI, a contrast agent had to be injected, which was also the trap EJ had set up. Sure enough, the murderer started to convulse continuously. He had gone into anaphylactic shock. EJ immediately administered emergency care to save him. It turned out that EJ had known from within the prison that the murderer was allergic to the contrast agent, and he successfully passed the final test. As a result, the delay of the sentence was granted. And by the time the prosecutor arrived, everything was already too late. The unconscious murderer was receiving emergency care, and everyone concluded that he had Wilson bipolar disorder. However, Min-sik was not going to let let this go easily. He ordered his subordinates to meet with the murderer's victims to stir them up. Meanwhile, when Dr. So-gum was about to approve the Wilson disease paperwork for the murderer, unexpectedly, a victim of the murderer came to plead with her. The victim said that if the murderer were released, she would never be able to live again. The girl was so filled with hatred for the murderer that she cut her own wrist with a knife to plead with So-gum not to approve it. The girl even showed her scar on her abdomen from the torture inflicted by the murderer. So-gum sympathized and hugged the girl tightly, promising her that no matter what, she would never release him. Because of the victim's story, So-gum immediately went to print the request for another examination of the young master. The subordinates saw this and reported back to Min-sik. He was very pleased that his plan had succeeded. The next day, when Yi-jae heard the news, he felt very uncomfortable. This completely disrupted his plan. Yi-jae immediately went to the examination site, but the prosecutor stopped him from entering. After a while, the examination concluded. The murderer was furious at being rejected by So-gum. He pretended to fall, and amidst the chaos, he pulled out a pen to stab So-gum in the chest. The stab hit an artery, which caused So-gum to quickly collapse. Yi-jae pressed down hard, trying to stem the bleeding, but within seconds, So-gum was almost lifeless, and the damn murderer was also spitting out blood. The doctors desperately tried to save So-gum. Yi-jae wanted to go in to help her, but was stopped by the director. He stayed behind, felt regretful, and suddenly wondered if he had been wrong. At that moment, the victim of the murderer appeared, and from her words, Yi-jae knew that Min-sik was behind this incident. Covered in blood, Yi-jae immediately drove straight to the prison, angrily opened the office door, and stormed in to confront Min-sik. Min-sik feigned an innocent expression. Yi-jae, that filled with rage, directly declared war against him. He stated that from now on, he would make Min-sik experience suffering. Hearing this, Min-sik still wore a triumphant expression, declaring to Yi-jae that he would remain the overlord of the prison. Min-sik warned Yi-jae that if he dared to act recklessly, someone would definitely die, and So-gum was the first victim he mentioned. A short while later, Yi-jae returned to the hospital. He felt relieved to see that So-gum had been saved. Suddenly, the murderer's father slapped Yi-jae, blaming him that why his son had pretended to be sick, but he really got sick. Yi-jae calmly shifted all the blame onto Min-sik. So-gum, who was beside him, realized Yi-jae's true intentions. It turned out he didn't want to help the murderer get released, but actually aimed to eliminate all the wealthy elites. Seizing this opportunity, the chairwoman, also Jae-won's mother, wanted to collaborate with Yi-jae. Yi-jae recognized that he needed her assistance to counter Min-sik, so he called and ordered that her son had permission to go to the medical room to rest. Meanwhile, Jae-won is miserable because of cleaning the toilet, all because of being bullied for days by the burly inmates in his cell. Jae-won was escorted away by the guard with smug looking. The next day, Yi-jae with the pharmacist went to meet the lady. From the pharmacist, they learned Min-sik's secret. He had exploited his position to inflate drug prices and replaced medications with drugs to sell to inmates. The high-priced drugs sold on the outside yielded profits of up to 200 million won per month. To defeat Min-sik, they first needed to gather evidence of this. However, while the group was discussing their plan, the prosecutor arrived, then demanded that both Yi-jae and the lady come in for questioning at the station, suspecting Yi-jae of fabricating the medical records to secure the murderer's release. A little later, Yi-jae was individually interrogated by the prosecutor. Just when he felt stuck and didn't know how to respond, the chairwoman's daughter arrived with a team of lawyers to defend Yi-jae. Unfortunately, So-gum, as a witness, walked in. Yi-jae initially thought he would lose this time because of So-gum. To his surprise, that So-gum denied any claims that Yi-jae had forged medical records. This time, she chose to side with Yi-jae. This infuriated the prosecutor, but he couldn't do anything about it. So-gum wanted to collaborate to defeat Min-sik, and in return, Yi-jae had to help her find her missing younger brother. At that moment, a subordinate reported to the prosecutor about Min-sik's trafficking of counterfeit drugs, prompting the prosecutor to shift his focus. The informant was one of Yi-jae's subordinates. In the outside, Yi-jae was delighted that everything was going according to plan. Meanwhile, Min-sik's men were loading the counterfeit drugs onto a vehicle. A nurse witnessed this and reported the license plate number to Yi-jae. The lady immediately drove her luxury car to follow them, taking photos of all evidence of counterfeit drug trafficking. They were bringing everything to a large pharmacy to unpack and separate it. The lady broke in and witnessed everything, promptly reporting it to Yi-jae. The inspector rushed over and caught them red-handed while they were packing the counterfeit drugs. 3 minutes later, the inspector stormed into the prison and issued an emergency arrest warrant for Min-sik for trafficking counterfeit drugs. At that moment, Yi-jae appeared with a challenging expression as he had won this time. However, when being taken statement, Min-sik showed no signs of fear. Min-sik believed he was being falsely accused. It wasn't until the inspector presented complaints from the prisoners regarding the counterfeit counterfeit drugs, along with photos of the illegal drug shipments, that Min-sik fell silent and unable to say anything. Min-sik then requested permission to call his family, specifically his powerful older brother from the Kim Soon family, who held a significant position as a director general. His brother assured him that the situation could be easily resolved as long as Min-sik stepped down from his position as the prison director. However, Min-sik sensed that something was off. He intended to return and inform his brother, but was stopped by the inspector, which was precisely what EJ wanted. Taking advantage of Min-sik's absence from the prison, EJ had a prisoner skilled at breaking into safes open Min-sik's secret vault. EJ obtained a hard drive containing all the secrets and immediately copied everything onto it, giving it to Sogum and asking her to investigate the lists contained within. However, after Sogum left, EJ discovered that the drive also contained information about Sogum's younger brother. The next day, the prison held a celebration for EJ's promotion to medical director. He delivered a speech on stage, officially securing this powerful position, while Min-sik rushed back to the prison as soon as his arrest warrant was lifted. The first thing was to check the safe, and fortunately the hard drive was still there. However, he suddenly realized that the marked location had been changed. Knowing that EJ was responsible for this made him extremely angry. After this incident, Jaewon also began to feel fear. He obediently helped the elderly to gain EJ's favor. Meanwhile, Min-sik was plotting a counterattack. He went to the special section to find a very powerful prisoner. That was the former Director General of the Central Intelligence Agency. Min-sik wanted him to stop EJ, promising to help the former Director General meet his son in return. The former Director General agreed and provided an important piece of information was that EJ had postponed the execution of sentences for many people in Ansan prison. Min-sik immediately drove there. At the same time, Sogum was investigating the VIP prisoner list obtained from Min-sik's safe. Normally, prisoners with severe depression and a fear of confined spaces were transferred to this area, but Sogum discovered that many prisoners on this list did not meet those criteria. She immediately reported this to EJ, realizing that this VIP section was filled with very wealthy individuals. Min-sik had certainly accepted bribes from them. Upon hearing this, EJ ordered health checks for all these prisoners. He wanted to punish them so that everyone could live fairly. When he brought the doctor to the place, it was evident that the prisoners there were living very comfortably. They were all the children and grandchildren of the tycoons. EJ examined one person and discovered that he had just used drugs. Sure enough, a search revealed a bag of drugs in the room. EJ ordered a search of all the cells. Seeing this, the jailers rushed in, but before they could do anything, that the former intelligence agency Director General blocked them. He stated that searching without the prisoner's consent was a violation of human rights and threatened to call a lawyer and file a lawsuit. Knowing that the former Director General was very familiar with the law, EJ had no choice but to temporarily halt the search. Meanwhile, Min-sik arrived at Ansan prison to meet the doctors there. The doctor informed him that EJ had postponed the execution of sentences for 30 prisoners, and 2 of them had died. Min-sik immediately called his subordinates to investigate the 2 deceased victims, as this was the clue to defeating EJ. After returning to his room, EJ took out a syringe and quietly went to the special section to meet the former Director General privately. EJ wanted to negotiate with him to avoid interference. When the former Director General refused to cooperate, EJ unexpectedly injected him in the neck with a drug that caused his blood vessels to constrict. EJ took advantage of this to get him out for emergency care from the prison. It ensured that no one could obstruct him anymore. However, EJ promised to let him meet his son. Hearing this, the former Director General immediately sided with EJ. Meanwhile, Sogum was reviewing her younger brother's data in the prison and discovered that her brother had even encountered Jaehwan's older brother, Jae-jun, who threatened to eliminate him if he were released. Just as Sogum was in shock, Jae-jun suddenly appeared, and the startled expression on her face piqued his curiosity. Fortunately, Sogum quickly switched to another video, and Jae-jun looked down to see only a hot girl. On the other side, EJ had helped the former Director General meet his son. The younger sister reported that Jae-jun was in Sogum's room, prompting EJ to rush over to her. EJ created a distraction to prevent Jae-jun from checking the computer, but Jae-jun still felt something was suspicious. He ordered his subordinates to steal Sogum's laptop. A little later, while Sogum was talking to EJ, someone sneaked into the room and took the laptop. Just then, So-gum returned to her room, and the thief pushed her down as he fled. Indeed, So-gum discovered that her computer was missing and wanted to check the security cameras. However, the guard informed her that only her room had lost power, so they couldn't check it. But when Jae-joon returned to his room and opened the computer, he found that there were no suspicious videos. He had no idea that So-gum had managed to delete the video in time. At that moment, Min-sik went to meet the prosecutor to file a complaint, stating that Yi-jae had helped 32 people postpone their sentences and caused the deaths of 2 individuals. The prosecutor immediately went to confront Yi-jae, presenting a list of the 2 victims who had died as a result of Yi-jae's actions during the fake illnesses. Surprisingly, Yi-jae remained very confident. He pointed out the prosecutor's errors in the medical records, noting that the cause of death listed was blood cancer, which was completely different from the illness he had confirmed for them. The explanation was so reasonable that the prosecutor had to give up. At this point, Min-sik still refused to back down. He went directly to meet the families of the 2 victims, wanting them to sign a complaint against Yi-jae. However, they told him that Yi-jae was not the one who had caused their father's death. The real culprit was the group of doctors at Hajin Hospital. Min-sik was stunned because that was his own hospital. The families explained that the hospital had taken half of their insurance money, which was why their father could not afford treatment and died there. Min-sik was shocked to hear that his subordinates had acted this way. He immediately drove back to his own hospital to investigate and discovered that in the past, Yi-jae had faked illnesses to postpone sentences for the victims, but Hajin Hospital had intentionally allowed the victims to die in order to embezzle their insurance money. Now Min-sik realized that he had been set up by Yi-jae. If this came to light, his entire family would surely go to prison. Min-sik's brother was extremely angry upon learning of the situation and continuously struck Min-sik in the face. However, since his brother held significant power, he used his connections to seek help from a commissioner. The higher-ups instructed Prosecutor Wee-sik to overlook this matter, but the upright prosecutor Wee-sik could not let it slide. He immediately contacted Yi-jae and requested collaboration to expose the horrific corruption of Min-sik, who had embezzled insurance money from the poor. This was precisely what Yi-jae wanted. Yi-jae recalled a past incident when he had postponed the sentence for a patient. If the patient had listened to Yi-jae and gone for treatment, then he would have been fine. However, the man wanted Hajin Hospital to pay for his insurance, so he refused treatment. Unfortunately, he died right there, and the doctors at Hajin Hospital heartlessly seized all of his insurance money. Therefore, Yi-jae aimed to punish Min-sik's hospital. Early the next morning, Prosecutor Wee-sik gathered with inspectors and stormed into Min-sik's hospital for a surprise investigation. At the same time, the former Director General directed his subordinates in prison to post news about the embezzlement of patients' insurance money by Hajin Hospital, while also rounding up all the inmates who were faking illnesses to serve their sentences there. Min-sik's sister hurried to inform him of this news, but it was already too late. The inspectors arrived at the scene to arrest Min-sik's younger sister. Min-sik hurriedly called his brother, but even his powerful brother had been taken into custody. As Min-sik was about to flee, the inspectors handcuffed him in front of his wife. To prevent the matter from being covered up by officials, Yi-jae urged Prosecutor Wee-sik to hold a press conference to disclose everything. Prosecutor Wee-sik promptly held a press conference to expose the insurance scandal and the fabricated medical records on television. So the operation was a resounding success. The chairwoman admired Yi-jae immensely and ordered Jae-in to prepare a gift to win Yi-jae's favor. Yi-jae went directly to visit Min-sik, who was in custody. However, Yi-jae told him that he was not the ultimate target, as the person he wanted to take revenge on the most was Jae-joon. Jae-joon had personally poisoned his biological father earlier to seize power. This act was witnessed by So-gum's younger brother Han-bit, who was hiding in the closet. Unfortunately, Han-bit made a noise and was discovered by Jae-joon. Just then, the daughter entered the room, and upon seeing her father, she took him for emergency treatment. Meanwhile, Jae-joon had Han-bit cornered in the wardrobe. Fortunately, after a while, Han-bit managed to push Jae-joon away and escape. It turned out that the chairman had foreseen his son Jae-joon's intention to kill him, so he had instructed Han-bit that if he were to die, he must lock down all of his shares. At the same time, the chairman handed Han-bit a USB drive containing evidence of Jae-joon's crimes, then instructed him to go directly to the evidence room to submit it. However, that evening, while Han-bit was on his way, he was followed by Jae-joon's car. Jae-joon had 3 of his subordinates block Han-bit's path. Just as they were about to eliminate Han-bit, the police police arrived on the scene. Desperate to survive, Han-bit devised a plan. He deliberately went outside and stole a police car, then crashed it into another vehicle to create an accident. As a result, Han-bit was arrested just before Jae-jun could kill him to silence him. Despite being in custody, Jae-jun signaled that he would still have Han-bit killed in prison. All the evidence was stored on the hard drive that Min-sik possessed. Min-sik threatened that if Jae-jun found out they were holding the evidence, they would all be eliminated. Lee-jae stated that their only option was to collaborate to defeat Jae-jun, who was the one behind the death of Lee-jae's mother. He demanded that Min-sik yielding control of the Hajin hospital to him, and even prepared the necessary documents for Min-sik to sign. Faced with the threat to his life, Min-sik reluctantly agreed to sign. Therefore, Lee-jae easily took control of Min-sik's hospital. He told Min-sik to enjoy the rest of his life in prison, which made Min-sik furious, causing him to kick the table and wanted to strike Lee-jae. However, Lee-jae was stronger, so he easily overpowered Min-sik, told Min-sik that he must pay for the people he had harmed, and then Lee-jae left. Min-sik remained, furiously shouting and venting his anger. A short while later, he called Jae-jun to propose a partnership to take down Lee-jae. Jae-jun ordered Min-sik to help him kill Congressman Jung, who was about to be transferred to the prison where Min-sik was being held. Left with no choice, Min-sik reluctantly agreed to murder for Jae-jun. Meanwhile, the female lead, So-jum, received a call from an unknown number. It was her previously missing brother Han-bit, who wanted to meet her to provide evidence of Jae-jun's crimes. So-jim immediately drove to the park to meet her brother, all while calling Lee-jae for support. The chairwoman, that having eavesdropped on So-jim's phone call, also knew of this and decided to go retrieve her late husband's shares. Since Jae-jun had also planted listening devices, he was already waiting there. When So-jim arrived at the meeting spot, Jae-jun's men quickly followed. So-gum was extremely emotional upon reuniting with her brother Han-bit, but before they could do anything, Jae-jun's subordinates rushed in. Han-bit could only run away as he was the sole witness who had seen Jae-jun kill his father. Therefore, Jae-jun's men determined to eliminate Han-bit. The chairwoman was furious but felt powerless to act. Meanwhile, Han-bit was being relentlessly pursued by numerous assassins, and soon that he was cornered in a tunnel. Jae-jun ordered 10 more assassins to join the chase, and he personally drove to block the tunnel's exit. Inside the tunnel, the assassins surrounded Han-bit, leaving him with no escape. Surprisingly, Lee-jae appeared and knocked Han-bit unconscious. A short while later, So-gum arrived, weeping at the thought that her brother was dead. Lee-jae was nearby but remained silent, unwilling to speak up. Jae-jun's group waited at the tunnel's exit, and the chairwoman scolded him for wanting to harm Han-bit, accusing him of wanting to seize all of her husband's shares. Jae-in berated Jae-jun for his cruelty. Just then, a subordinate ran up to report that Han-bit was nowhere to be found. The group had no choice but to disperse. The chairwoman's men also left, and So-gum approached the chairwoman to confront her about her presence at the scene. The chairwoman reluctantly explained everything, revealing that Han-bit was the chairman's personal advisor and had been entrusted with sealing the shares to prevent them from falling into Jae-jun's hands. It was crucial to note that in just 48 days, the shareholder meeting to elect the new chairperson of the Taikang Group would take place. If Han-bit failed to deliver those shares to her in time, Jae-jun would seize control of the entire corporation. After knowing the truth about the situation, So-gum was extremely worried for her brother's safety, but felt powerless to act. The next day, Min-sik was escorted back to prison, seated in the same vehicle as Congressman Jung, to facilitate the assassination. Min-sik investigated and discovered that Congressman Jung held incriminating evidence against Jae-jun, which was why Jae-jun wanted Min-sik to kill Mr. Jung. Suddenly, Congressman Jung suffered a heart attack. Having been a doctor before, Min-sik offered to inject him with medication. As he received the drug, Min-sik swiftly switched it for poison. 2 minutes later, Congressman Jung began to convulse, but Min-sik covered his mouth, preventing the guards from noticing. Congressman Jung waited helplessly for death. Meanwhile, the chairwoman visited her son Jae-hwan, who had become obedient after enduring days of torment. Lee-jae approached to discuss postponing Jae-hwan's execution, in exchange for the chairwoman investigating the person who caused the car crash that killed Lee-jae's best friend's couple 3 years ago. At that moment, staff reported that Congressman Jung was convulsing. Upon arriving, Lee-jae immediately suspected Min-sik was behind it, but was unsure what poison had been used. That made it difficult to save Mr. Jung. Min-sik then stated he would provide the antidote, but only if Lee-jae agreed to negotiate with him. Lee-jae shouted, demanding to know what Min-sik truly wanted. Congressman Jung, who was beside them, was convulsing more violently. Suddenly, EJ realized that it was Min-sik who was panicking as he kept glancing at his watch. EJ accused Min-sik of being too afraid that not dare to kill Congressman Jung because he feared the consequences. Seeing that his plan had been exposed, Min-sik reluctantly handed over the antidote to EJ. Thanks to that, Congressman Jung was saved right in time. Min-sik was subsequently taken away by the jailer, officially becoming a prisoner in the facility. Meanwhile, Han-bit was still at EJ's house. EJ asked his younger sister to keep an eye on him. A little later, she expressed concern, suggested they should stop, and feared that confronting Jae-jun would put their lives at risk. She didn't want to lose EJ the way she lost their mother years ago. EJ replied that if he gave up, who would fight for the victims? He was determined to fight against evil until the end. His younger sister clenched her fists, encouraging EJ to persevere. Unfortunately, Jae-jun discovered that EJ had saved Han-bit and immediately ordered the elimination of both. At the same time, Min-sik was in his cell when, during the night, a guard loyal to him came to unlock the door. Min-sik led the guard to Congressman Jung's room, planning to secretly inject him with poison to frame EJ. However, when he touched Congressman Jung's hand, he felt that it was very cold. It turned out that Congressman Jung had already died. While Min-sik was still in shock, the doctors on site caught him in the act. Two doctors quickly rushed to provide first aid to the congressman, while also calling EJ for guidance. Just as EJ was about to head to the prison that his younger sister called, informing him that many assassins were surrounding their house, EJ immediately realized that Jae-jun had found Han-bit and sent assassins after him. In this urgent situation, So-gum urged EJ to go save Congressman Jung while she would handle Jae-jun herself. Meanwhile, the doctor, who had just attempted to assassinate Congressman Jung, went to the security camera room while the guard was sleeping, secretly erasing the footage of his attack. As Jae-jun was preparing to storm the building, So-gum managed to drive her car into a bench, making a loud noise that attracted the attention of the surrounding people. This distraction caused Jae-jun to temporarily withdraw from his plans. Back with EJ, he was desperately trying to resuscitate Congressman Jung but was completely powerless as the congressman's heart had stopped beating. Prosecutor Wee-sik was also present, and everyone thought Min-sik was the perpetrator. However, EJ suspected that the real culprit was someone else, so he asked the prosecutor to thoroughly investigate the congressman's death. After that, EJ met with Han-bit. He informed EJ that Congressman Jung also held significant shares in the corporation. It seemed that Jae-jun had killed him to seize those shares. Since Han-bit's position had been exposed, EJ decided to take everyone to the home of the lady, seeking refuge there. The lady was furious and told them that her home was not a hostel, but EJ promised to find a way to exculpate for her. It turned out that the lady had been falsely accused of murdering her husband's mistress. In order to prove her innocence, she reluctantly agreed to let them stay. Meanwhile, the prosecutor was interrogating Min-sik. He claimed that he had not had the chance to inject the poison before Congressman Jung had died. The prosecutor was certain there was a second perpetrator involved. After Congressman Jung's death, since he had no wife or children, Jae-jun took it upon himself to preside over the congressman's funeral. He pretended that Congressman Jung was a close friend of his father's, but in reality, he was doing this to take control of the congressman's shares. Jae-jun had just killed the congressman and was now organizing his funeral. Jae-in and the chairwoman knew this, but felt powerless to act. Meanwhile, Min-sik, who was in prison, received information from his younger sister. She brought news about Jae-jun's chemical company, which had caused the deaths of 7 people. During their time in the car together, Congressman Jung had shared this incident with Min-sik. Years ago, the families of the 7 victims had gathered to protest, but Jae-jun had hired assassins to drive a truck straight into them. Jae-jun ruthlessly eliminated all the family members of the victims who opposed him. Finally, Min-sik discovered Jae-jun's secret. He believed he could exploit this information to get out of prison. Min-sik immediately called EJ, urging him to come meet him if he wanted to defeat Jae-jun. Meanwhile, EJ attended Congressman Jung's funeral. He was unable to contain his anger upon seeing Jae-jun there. EJ directly declared war on Jae-jun, asserting that he would soon pay for his actions. Han-bit handed over all the shares entrusted to him by the late chairman to the lady. They needed to hide them to prevent Jae-jun from stealing them. That night, the perpetrator who had run over the disabled couple was released from prison. The lady and So-gum secretly followed him. The perpetrator received a large sum of money from Jae-jun's subordinates to facilitate his escape abroad. The next morning, the two tracked him to the airport and immediately reported this to EJ. EJ contacted prosecutor Wee-sik, explaining that this perpetrator had been hired by Jae-jun to run over Jae-hwan, his younger brother, but had accidentally killed the 2 friends instead. At that moment, the perpetrator reached the check-in area. With no other options left, the lady decided to create a distraction and tried to buy time. This allowed EJ to arrive arrived just in time to inject the perpetrator with a tranquilizer. However, Jae-jun's subordinates rushed in to stop Yi-jae. In the midst of the chaos, the perpetrator managed to escape, but fortunately So-jum arrived just in time and knocked him down. The inspector arrived and apprehended the perpetrator. Jae-jun furiously attacked his subordinate, demanding to know why they hadn't killed the perpetrator sooner. At that moment, Jae-jun suddenly remembered that Yi-jae had a younger sister, so he ordered the kidnapping of both her and So-jum. Meanwhile, the perpetrator was being interrogated but refused to confess, no matter how much they inflicted him. After 10 hours of stubborn silence, So-gum advised Yi-jae to shift tactics and focus on psychological pressure instead of physical violence. Yi-jae told the perpetrator whether he thinked he was really important. Once he was no longer useful, Jae-jun would certainly have him killed. This strategy proved effective. The perpetrator eventually revealed that everything had been orchestrated by Jae-jun, from the murders of the car crash killing the married couple to running down citizens who opposed him. With sufficient evidence of Jae-jun's crimes gathered, Yi-jae handed all the evidence over to prosecutor Wee-sik, including details about the conspiracy to kill multiple people. Yi-jae urged prosecutor Wee-sik to arrest Jae-jun immediately. At the same time, Min-sik's subordinates had obtained evidence of Jae-jun's embezzlement hidden in Congressman Jung's shoes. They quickly brought a USB drive with this information to Min-sik in prison. Min-sik was delighted and entrusted it to one of his most reliable associates. Prosecutor Wee-sik received all the evidence, but he hesitated to submit it. It turned out that the fat doctor had tipped off Jae-jun. Jae-jun immediately went to meet prosecutor Wee-sik to negotiate the destruction of the evidence, offering him the position of district public prosecutor as an incentive. The attractive offer made prosecutor Wee-sik think twice. Meanwhile, Jae-jun sent his men to the house of the lady to abduct Yi's younger sister. Fortunately, the lady anticipated this and managed to save both of them just in time. Failing to capture Yi-jae's sister, Jae-jun shifted his focus to So-gum, intending to use her as leverage to force Yi-jae into submission. He called Yi-jae to demand that he hand over the evidence, promising that So-gum would be spared, including the shares belonging to the late chairman. With no other choice, Yi-jae reluctantly agreed to Jae-jun's demands. However, this was all part of Yi-jae's plan. In fact, Yi-jae and So-gum had anticipated that Jae-jun would eventually capture her, so they intended to use this situation to uncover Jae-jun's weaknesses. Jae-jun took So-jum to his old house. He reminisced about the past, when his father had an affair with the chairwoman. Jae-jun's mother was extremely disappointed, so she had committed suicide. He vowed to take over the entire corporation and drive the chairwoman and her son out. After their conversation, Jae-jun released So-gum. Meanwhile, Yi-jae also handed over all the shares of the Taekang group as Jae-jun requested, along with all the evidence of his crimes. Delighted, Jae-jun thought he would surely take control of the group. Just as he was about to have his secretary transfer the shares to himself, the chairwoman surprisingly appeared to stop him, presenting the will of the late chairman to Congressman Jung. Since Congressman Jung had died, manager Han Bit would temporarily oversee these shares. Han Bit was also So-jum's younger brother. At this point, Jae-jun realized that Yi-jae was not simple at all. He had managed to keep the shares while also bringing Han Bit into the public eye for protection. The conflict was becoming increasingly intense. To ensure Yi-jae's safety, he sent his sister to temporarily stay abroad. At the same time, to strengthen their forces against Jae-jun, Yi-jae went to the prison to meet Min-sik. He helped Min-sik escape from the arrest warrant and promised to assist him in becoming the head of the VIP department at Taekang Hospital. That was a position Min-sik had always dreamed of. Therefore, Min-sik pretended to agree to serve Yi-jae. The chairwoman pointed out that to become the head of the department, they needed the approval of the steel chairman, so the two of them went to meet him. Yi-jae promised to cure his son completely because Yi-jae had found a suitable liver donor. The chairman had only a son, so he agreed to the position of head of the department for Min-sik. Unexpectedly, at that moment, Jae-jun devised a more ruthless plan. He wanted to kill his father, who was in the hospital, to seize the inheritance. Jae-jun approached the chief doctor and asked him to administer poison to his father in exchange for helping him become the head of the VIP department. Driven by greed, the chief doctor agreed to the scheme. However, just as he reached the door, Yi-jae anticipated the situation and rushed to stop him. Yi-jae warned him to cease the act of poisoning the chairman, stating that if he didn't, he would expose the doctor and ensure he ended up in prison. Terrified, the chief doctor backed down. That night, Jae-jun directly entered his father's hospital room, where his father lay unconscious from the poison he had administered earlier. Cold-hearted, Jae-jun pulled out his father's breathing tube and ready to let him die. Just in time, Yi-jae rushed in and reconnected the tube to save him. Curious about Jae-jun's cruelty, Yi-jae asked how he could be so heartless. Jae-jun replied that anyone who stood in his way must die, and Yi-jae would not be able to stop him from killing his father. At that moment, the chairwoman and Jae-in also arrived, and Jae-jun nonchalantly stated that his father must die soon. After saying that, he left the room. At this moment, prosecutor Wee-sik was still without any leads on the murderer of Congressman Jung. Yi-jae unexpectedly sent a video revealing the perpetrator to be Dr. Young Chol. The doctor was immediately arrested while on the street. The next day, Yi-jae held a meeting to strategize on how to eliminate the competition for the position of director. They discovered that the candidate backed by Jae-jun was suffering suffering from Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel condition. EJ recalled when he worked with this doctor, he frequently had to go toilet. If they could worsen the candidate's condition before the next election meeting, EJ's side would surely win the election. At the same time, Min-seok was also undergoing treatment for his intestinal inflammation. Due to a colonoscopy, he had to be anesthetized. During the procedure, the doctor found a colon polyp. Following the chairwoman's orders, the doctor removed the polyp and administered 2 vials of an unusual medication which had been provided by EJ. This medication thinned the intestinal walls, causing Min-seok to suffer from continuous bowel movements. EJ approached Min-seok and urged him to rest, warning him that if he didn't, he could face serious consequences. However, Min-seok ignored EJ's advice. As everyone gathered and prepared for the election, Min-seok, despite his discomfort, that struggled alongside Jae-jun to attend. However, just 5 minutes later, Min-seok collapsed in pain, forcing everyone to rush him into emergency surgery. Jae-jun had no more candidates left, so he accepted defeat, but left to devise an even larger scheme. Soon after, in his father's hospital room, a nurse entered and turned off the electrocardiogram and alarm machine. Meanwhile, the election had concluded, and Min-seok successfully became the head of the VIP department. However, during this time, Jae-jun had managed to kill his father, because when his father died, he would inherit the property. Jae-jun's ambition had reached unprecedented heights, instilling fear in both the chairwoman and Jae-in. But Min-seok remained remarkably calm, as he had anticipated Jae-jun's actions. Min-seok also had a plan in place for their collaboration once he assumed his new position. The funeral proceeded quickly, with Jae-won taking a day off to pay his respects. He knelt and wept painfully for his father's death, suspecting that his older brother, Jae-jun, was behind it. However, because of lacking evidence, he was unable to take action. Jae-jun even pushed Jae-won to the ground, causing him to foam at the mouth. After the funeral, the 3 family members gathered. They were certain that Jae-jun had murdered their father. To take him down, they knew they had to get Jae-won out of prison. Their mother and younger sister had prepared a plan, and Jae-won's task was to follow Yi-jae's instructions. Jae-won understood that it was time to mature and seek revenge for his father's death, obediently listening to his mother's advice. Back at the prison, Jae-won knelt down, pleading with Yi-jae to help him delay his execution. He promised that he would do anything to repay Yi-jae in the future. Seeing Jae-won's sincerity, Yi-jae agreed to help. He decided to fake a case of rhabdomyolysis for Jae-won, warning him that this condition could potentially lead to death. However, with a strong resolve to avenge his father, Jae-won accepted the risk. At this point, Min-seok unexpectedly betrayed Yi-jae. He met with Jae-jun and promised to prevent Jae-won from being released, eliminating a rival for the chairman position before the upcoming shareholders meeting. In exchange, Min-seok demanded the position of hospital director at the Conglomerate. Driven by ambition, Jae-jun readily agreed. Min-seok continued to pretend to be on Yi-jae's side, calling him and requesting permission for his subordinate to enter the prison under the guise of handling tasks. In reality, Min-seok was sending someone in to harm Jae-won. Yi-jae was unaware of the scheme, so he agreed without hesitation. But Jae-jun not only wants to prevent Jae-won from being released, but also kill his younger brother. This shocking statement left Min-seok stunned, as he never imagined Jae-jun could be so ruthless. The next day, the mole infiltrated the prison, introducing himself to the medical staff. He observed Jae-won pushing his body to the limit by overexerting himself in extreme heat, causing symptoms of rhabdomyolysis to surface. Reducing Jae-won's water intake would lead to severely damage in his kidneys. Jae-won, driven by revenge, that pushed his body to the extreme by over-exercising, while Yi-jae even gave him medication to induce kidney failure. Day after day, Jae-won trained through immense hardship, but each night the insider would come with water to tempt him. Fortunately, Jae-won's willpower was strong. He refused to drink and drove the insider away. The insider reported back to Min-seok. Min-seok then ordered him to harm Jae-won while he slept. A few days later, Jae-won's body had deteriorated significantly, but he persisted until his urine turned as dark as Coca-Cola. Yi-jae said that this meant they had succeeded. Meanwhile, prosecutor Wee-sik was on a date with the lady, even giving her flowers. Unbeknownst to them, Jae-jun's henchmen secretly took photos of their meeting to use against them later. Back in the prison while Jae-won was sleeping, the insider attempted to inject him with something. Suddenly, Jae-won woke up and stabbed the syringe into the insider's own body. As it turned out, Yi-jae had anticipated this move. He took the antidote from the insider and forced him to call his boss. Unexpectedly, the person who answered the phone was Jae-jun. Yi-jae clearly knew that Jae-jun being on the phone, but he still pretended and told Min-seok to quickly bring Jae-jun's incriminating evidence. The goal was to sow distrust between Min-seok and Jae-jun. However, a moment later, Yi-jae turned and found that Jae-won had become unconscious. Yi-jae panicked because Jae-won's heart had stopped. He used all his strength to perform CPR while rushing Jae-won to the emergency room. The chairwoman was extremely worried and arrived quickly. She realized that if her son died, owning the corporation wouldn't matter anymore. She ordered the doctors to save Jae-won immediately. At that moment, Jae-won unexpectedly regained consciousness and begged his mother to let him continue enduring the suffering to avenge his father. Seeing her son's determination, she reluctantly agreed to his request. Meanwhile, prosecutor Wee-sik and the lady had just returned from their outing, discussing how to capture Jae-jun. Suddenly, they were surrounded by reporters that summoned by Jae-jun. The reporters accused prosecutor Wee-sik of dating a criminal who was on a temporary stay of execution. This enraged Wee-sik's superiors, and he was promptly reassigned. Prosecutor Wee-sik was immediately transferred to work elsewhere. With Wee-sik gone, no one remained to stand in Jae-jun's way. On Jae-jun's side, he began systematically eliminating those around Yi-jae. He called Min-sik to confront him about withholding evidence of his crimes. Min-sik explained that he was doing it to protect himself in case Jae-jun ever tried to silence him. Jae-jun found the reasoning plausible, so the two continued to cooperate. Of course, Jae-jun wasn't going to let it slide so easily. Jae-jun ordered his men to locate Min-sik's daughter. Meanwhile, prosecutor Wee-sik met with Yi-jae to inform him that he had been reassigned to another place. However, he still had 18 days of leave left, so he intended to stay and assist Yi-jae. They both knew they were running out of time. Yi-jae rushed back to the hospital, announcing that they needed to act faster. The review for postponing Jae-won's execution had been delayed by a week, meaning Jae-won would need a new illness to prolong his stay. Yi-jae asked if the late chairman had any hereditary diseases, but the chairwoman didn't agree with that. Because her husband had a very painful illness, she didn't want Jae-won to suffer the same. Later, Yi-jae visited the former hospital director, whom he had once saved, to ask why Jae-jun had killed his mother years ago. The bedridden director explained that a group of people had protested against Taekon Chemical Company after losing family members to the company's negligence. Jae-jun had ordered a driver to run them over and killed them all. However, Yi-jae, who was a doctor at the time, had saved their lives, causing Jae-jun to be criticized and lose his chance to inherit the corporation. That's why Jae-jun killed Yi-jae's mother and put him in prison that year. After hearing this, Yi-jae finally understood why Jae-jun had set him up. The former director then revealed a crucial piece of information, that was Jae-jun occasionally suffered from memory loss. Perhaps Jae-jun also had the strange hereditary disease from his late father. To find out what it was, Yi-jae went to see Min-sik and asked him to look for the chairman's medical records. As the VIP department head, Min-sik had access to the hospital's confidential information, and Yi-jae promised to return the Hajun private hospital to him in exchange. Min-sik, seeing no loss for himself, that agreed immediately. However, when he tried to access the chairman's medical records, he found they were restricted and required higher access right. Min-sik decided to go directly to the hospital director for answers. The hospital director explained that all information regarding the chairman's medical records was strictly confidential because if it were to be revealed, it could affect the entire corporation. Min-sik asked if the illness was hereditary, and coincidentally, Jae-jun was sitting at a nearby table and overheard everything. Hearing the word hereditary disease, Jae-jun's expression immediately changed because he himself was suffering from the same illness. Meanwhile, thanks to a nurse's help, Yi-jae was able to see the medication the late chairman had been taking. From there, he diagnosed that the hereditary illness the late chairman suffered from was Huntington's disease, a condition that deteriorates the body even worse than HIVs. So Geum told Yi-jae that Jae-jun also showed symptoms of Huntington's disease, which meant he had inherited it from his father. This would disqualify Jae-jun from inheriting the corporation if the truth came to light. However, they still lacked the evidence to prove that Jae-jun had the disease. The most important task at hand was still to delay Jae-won's execution. Yi-jae planned to have Jae-won fake Huntington's disease, claiming it was inherited from their father. However, the chairwoman did not agree because she was concerned about her son's health. But Jae-won went to his mother, then pleaded for her to let him continue, determined to avenge his father. Moved by her son's resolve, the chairwoman tearfully embraced Jae-won. Unexpectedly, when Yi-jae examined Jae-won, he discovered that Jae-won had truly developed Huntington's disease. The chairwoman, upon hearing this, was heartbroken. The very thing she had feared the most had come to pass, and in her shock, that she fainted on the spot. At this moment, Min-sik arrived, seeking to collaborate with Yi-jae once again. He had known that Jae-jun had threatened the life of his daughter, so Min-sik wanted to work with Yi-jae to bring Jae-jun down before Jae-jun could harm his family. Yi-jae agreed without hesitation. Later, Min-sik pretended to kneel and apologize to Jae-jun. He informed Jae-jun that his younger brother, Jae-hwan, had indeed contracted Huntington's disease. Upon hearing this, Jae-jun's eye twitched uncontrollably and his hands began to tremble almost beyond his control, as he too was suffering from the same disease. Worried that his condition would be exposed, his subordinate quickly dismissed Min-sik. After Min-sik left, Jae-jun ordered his men to kill his brother Jae-hwan at all costs, ensuring that he would never be granted a delay in his execution. After witnessing Jae-jun's symptoms, Min-sik immediately returned to report to Yi-jae that Jae-jun was indeed suffering from the disease. In reality, this was all part of Yi-jae's plan. Yi-jae had fabricated the story of Jae-hwan having the disease to provoke Jae-jun into falling into the trap. Jae-hwan was actually not suffering from the disease at all and had been cooperating with Yi-jae to fake the symptoms, including difficulty walking, inability to hold objects, and even pretending to be on the verge of jumping off a building to end his life. As expected, Jae-jun's subordinate recorded a video of these symptoms. After watching the footage, Jae-jun became fully convinced that his younger brother had indeed contracted Huntington's disease. With only 2 days left before the medical examination to decide whether to delay Jae-won's execution, Jae-jun gave the order to kill Jae-won that very night. Min-sik immediately relayed this information to Yi-jae. Yi-jae quickly devised a plan, leaving Jae-hwan alone and setting up surveillance cameras to catch Jae-jun and his men in the act. They planned to arrest everyone involved when Jae-jun attempted the assassination. However, while everyone was anxiously monitoring the cameras and waiting for the right moment, Yi-jae suddenly received a call from the prison, informing him that several inmates had contracted a strange illness and were vomiting blood. It became clear that this was another part of Jae-jun's plan. Yi-jae had no choice but to assign the current task to his team and immediately drive back to the prison. At that very moment, Jae-jun had already arrived at his younger brother, Jae-hwan's location. Firstly, Jae-jun had his men hack the surveillance cameras, replacing the live feed with a fixed video loop. As a result, those monitoring the cameras saw Jae-hwan sitting alone, completely unaware that he was in danger. When Jae-hwan saw his older brother, he panicked and fell to the ground in fear. Jae-jun then pulled out a vial of poison and prepared a syringe, ready to inject his brother. Believing that Jae-hwan was moments away from death, Jae-jun confessed the truth. He had been the one who killed their father, and now it was Jae-hwan's turn. Jae-jun drew the syringe closer to Jae-hwan's neck, but Jae-hwan pointed up at the ceiling, saying that there were cameras in the room. Jae-jun coldly replied that he had already hacked all of them. Without hesitation, Jae-jun injected the poison into Jae-hwan's neck. As the poison took effect, Jae-hwan collapsed. He confused and wondered why no one had come to save him. Luckily, Yi-jae had previously placed a listening device in Jae-hwan's ear, allowing him to hear everything that was happening. Realizing the danger, Yi-jae immediately alerted his team. Despite checking the cameras, they still only saw the fake footage of Jae-hwan alone, and by the time they figured out the truth, it was too late. The team rushed to the scene, but Jae-hwan had already suffered brain death and was likely to remain in a coma indefinitely. When Yi-jae finally arrived, he found that there was nothing more he could do. At that moment, Jae-jun suddenly appeared at the scene. He directly provoked Yi-jae, challenging him to save Jae-hwan. Yi-jae was extremely furious upon hearing that. Jae-jun declared that he would destroy anyone who dared oppose him. At that moment, Jae-hwan's heart had completely stopped, and no matter what Yi-jae did, he couldn't save Jae-hwan. He was overwhelmed with despair, feeling that no matter how hard he tried, the enemy always managed to outsmart him. Yi-jae silently wondered, is it really this difficult to punish the wicked? Suddenly, Jae-hwan's heart started beating again, but it was clear that his brain had suffered severe damage, leaving him in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. Yi-jae went to apologize to Jae-hwan's mother for everything that had happened. Unable to contain her emotions, the chairwoman slapped Yi-jae across the face. Despite her anger, she said they still needed to help Yi-jae defeat Jae-jun, because now more than ever, they had to unite to defeat their enemy. Yi-jae then gathered everyone to devise their final plan for the showdown. That very night, Yi-jae went to confront Jae-jun directly. Jae-jun was confident that he had everything under control, boasted that no one could defeat him now. However, Yi-jae was merely stalling for time, allowing the prosecutors and his team to infiltrate Jae-jun's building. The bodyguards at the entrance refused to let the prosecutors enter. With no other option, the team resorted to force to let the prosecutors could go on. But once they got inside, they were unexpectedly blocked by the general prosecutor himself. He was now also under Jae-jun's influence as well. It became apparent that many high-ranking officials had been bought by Jae-jun's immense wealth and power. But Prosecutor Wee-sik is an upright man. He still gave the order for his team to storm in. Meanwhile, Jae-jun was casually conversing with Yi-jae. Seizing the moment when Jae-jun was distracted, Yi-jae quickly injected a large dose of medication into his neck. Yi-jae then continuously taunted Jae-jun, claiming it was poison and that he would die soon. Believing his end was near, Jae-jun grabbed a knife and attempted to stab Yi-jae. Yi-jae managed to maneuver the blade away from any vital areas, and after stabbing Yi-jae, Jae-jun succumbed to the effects of the drug and collapsed to the floor. At that moment, Min-sik entered the room with a medical team. It turned out this was all part of Yi-jae's plan. He had only injected Jae-jun with a temporary anesthetic, anticipating that Jae-jun would attack against him. Yi-jae ensured that the knife wound was as minimal as possible. Prosecutor Wee-sik then stormed in, catching Jae-jun in the act of attempted murder, a crime warranting immediate arrest without a warrant. However, powerful figures like Jae-jun were not easily defeated. The general prosecutor, who had been bribed, was determined to protect him. Despite being charged with attempting to murder Yi-jae, the chief of police personally arrived and assured Jae-jun that he would help him avoid the charges within 2 days. As the shareholders' meeting to elect the next chairman was only 3 days away. While in jail, Jae-jun behaved obediently and always stayed calm to avoid recurrenting his disease. Indeed, that 2 days later, the police chief personally brought the order to suspend Jae-jun's detention and escorted him out. After back home, Jae-jun hurriedly took his medication, preparing for the shareholders' meeting to elect the company chairman the next day. On the day of the meeting, the two candidates for the chairman position, Jae-hwan's mother and Jae-jun, were present. The members of the corporation were getting ready to vote when Yi-jae unexpectedly brought in Jae-hwan, who was in a coma. Everyone was puzzled as to why Yi-jae had brought an unconscious person. Yi-jae then played a recorded conversation between Jae-jun and his younger brother, in which Jae-jun admitted to killing their father. The recording also captured the sound of Jae-jun injecting poison into his brother. Jae-hwan's mother was heartbroken after hearing the confession confession, but Jae-joon arrogantly claimed that audio recordings could be faked, and there was no one who could prove he had tried to kill his brother. Smugly, he challenged anyone to step forward as a witness. To everyone's shock, Jae-won suddenly woke up, turning Jae-joon's confidence into fear. It turned out that before Jae-joon injected the poison, Jae-won had already administered the antidote to himself and then pretended to be brain dead to make Jae-joon subjective. Jae-won's mother was overjoyed to see her son safe and sound. With all the witnesses and evidence clear, Jae-joon was immediately convicted. Witnessing everything he held dear slip away, Jae-joon was so shocked that his disease flared up, then he collapsed. The cruel Jae-joon was finally punished, and the truth about his crimes, killing their father and numerous workers, was revealed. Jae-won's mother officially took over as chairwoman of the company. In prison, Jae-joon pretended to get a stuck-in throat and fake death to stay of execution, but Lee Jae, the prison's medical director, had foreseen this. He confidently promised Jae-joon that he could never leave prison for the rest of his life. And with that, the movie comes to an end. Thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you in the next videos. Bye-bye.